Alright, hey guys, this is Druin. This is my mechanics video for my Tempest Rush build, so I'm just going to showcase some quick mechanics stuff, just so people, have the actual video evidence of how some of these skills work, and also because some of it helps to explain why I use some of the skills that I use. So first I'm going to showcase the different things, and then I will hopefully be able to explain them. When doing empirical testing stuff like this in this game, I highly recommend de-equipping all your attack speed gear, so you have 1 attacks per second, and then getting a minimum damage weapon, or ring, with just minimum damage, and then no other average damage gear like I have right here. And what will happen is your auto attack will move from, I think, 2 to 4 damage to whatever the minimum is plus 4. So in this case I have plus 30 minimum, so it goes from 2 to 4 damage to 34 to 34 damage. And that makes all of your hits do a static amount of damage. So, heading over to Leoric's Manor, my number one favorite farm spot, or testing spot, I suppose. I'll be able to show this by just auto-attacking, and all the auto-attacks will hit for relatively the same amount of damage. I'm going to kill those guys first. Die. Raw, scorn. Okay. Yeah, whatever. I don't care about that. Okay, terrific. Terrific. I don't want those guys. Okay, so as you can see, 640, whatever, 646, 646, 646, 646, 646. So it always hits for 646, because, again, it's a minimum only damage. It's good for testing. So, now, let's do some mechanics stuff. So Tempest Rush has some pretty weird mechanics. So it says, does damage hobbles their movement. And that's pretty much all it says. It says it costs 15 spirit plus an additional 10. One sec. Okay. And what that actually means is it costs 15 spirit to just cast. And then it costs an additional 10 spirit per second per 1 attack speed you have. So in this case, I have 1 attacks per second. So it costs 10 spirit per second, which means I can Tempest Rush for a long time because I have 8 spirit per second on. So it costs 10, I have 8 regen, it costs essentially 2 per second. And I've got 250 spirit. So that's a long time that I can Tempest Rush. Oh, right. Also in this case, I have Northern Breeze on, so it actually only costs 8 per second per attack speed. So I should theoretically be able to Tempest Rush forever. I probably can't because it's a little bit buggy, but it's pretty close. So that's the cost. The actual damage comes, for whatever reason, in 3 hits per second per attack speed. So you'd think that it would just hit once per second because I have 1 attacks per second. But that's certainly not the case. So let's see if I can get this guy locked into a corner. Alright. Oh, I almost had it there. Alright. This might take a second, but... Alright. Right here you can see it is very, very clearly hitting faster than once per second. And hopefully I'll actually take a 10 frame or 30 frame section and 30 frame. I'm pressing at 30 per second, so a 30 frame section and show you it hitting exactly 3 times in 10 seconds. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, cool. So that's with 1 attacks per second, right? So now let's see what happens if I increase my attacks per second to 1.2. So I don't know how noticeable that is on your end, but I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to slow down 30 frames, so you can see in 1 second, well, in this case I'll just use as many frames as it takes and tell you, but the idea is that it should take less than 30 frames, so less than 1 second to hit 3 times, because I have 1.2 attacks per second. What that means is actually pretty significant, because it means that Tempest Rush, even though it has a low proc coefficient, hits much, much faster than you would think. So when you're wielding a 1 attacks per second scorn, so even when you're using a 1 attacks per second scorn, it will still hit 3 times per second, which leads to a lot more cyclones than you would think. So the next thing I'm going to show you is the proc coefficient on Tempest Rush. So proc coefficient is a ability or attacks. Hold on. Okay. Proc coefficient is an ability or attack's chance to do specific things. So for instance, ability with a proc coefficient of 1 would be just an auto attack. So this punch, I believe, has a proc coefficient of 1. Certainly test that. So let's see here. Okay. Oh, I don't have to do that anymore. I got better items. Forgot about that. Okay, so I have 0 life per second, 0 life steal, so I have no way to make green numbers appear except for life on hit. So you can see my life just sits there. Hit once, 1,000 life gained. I have exactly 1,000 life per hit. 1,000 life back. 1,000 life back. Pretty straightforward. So Tempest Rush does exactly 250 life per hit, which means that for every time you see a damage number pop up, it has a proc coefficient of 0.25. What that means is that things like Cyclone or Sweeping Winds, so I just cast Sweeping Wind Cyclone, and I hit, it crits, it automatically ups the count. I hit, it crits, automatically ups the count. And that's because auto attacks have a proc coefficient of 1. So let's see if I can get to... So every time I hit, it will spawn a Cyclone, 100% of the time, because it has a proc coefficient of 1. As long as the attack crits, which is the requirement for a Cyclone to spawn, it will spawn a Cyclone. Let's see if I can... There, bam, automatic Cyclone. Bam, automatic Cyclone. Bam, automatic Cyclone. So that's what happens if you have a proc coefficient of 1. Now, Tempest Rush does not have a proc coefficient of 1. So if I make Cyclone happen, you just saw some crits. There's another crit. There's another crit. It hasn't even upped my count yet. There's a crit. I just got 2 crits, and it instantly upped the count. And that just is luck of the draw. So now you'll see crit, nothing, crit, nothing, crit, nothing, 0 Cyclones so far. And that's because a proc coefficient of 0.25 is a lot lower than a proc coefficient of 1. So there you go. I just got some Cyclone procs right there. So it is lower than, ideally you would want. You'd want Tempest Rush to have a much higher proc coefficient to make Cyclone even better. But, as you will see in my video, hopefully, that you've already seen, it spawns enough Cyclones, and generally speaking, with this Tempest Rush build, only 1 Cyclone is required to clean up a lot of mobs. Okay, so that's the proc coefficient on Tempest Rush. Monitor of Conviction submission, and the way that this works is, as you can see, it does damage, right? It's just constantly hitting for 60 damage, I guess. Yeah, and when you move around like this, what will happen is you'll occasionally drop the aura for a second, get out of range for a second, and it'll kind of make the numbers tweak out for a little bit, and then they'll steady back to 60. It'll also very randomly, and I don't know why, occasionally hit for 1.2 times damage. So you'll see 73s. It's not happening right now, but I assure you it does happen. There's random 73 just happened. But anyway, mostly 60s. Now, all the stats that you have, so crit damage, dexterity, average damage, they all affect this number. So if my Zeph Emmy has no stats that help me except 8% crit. If I remove it, bam, just drops the DPS of submission to 58. What this means, and then let's see, do I have anything that's pure crit damage? I don't think so. So I don't think I'll be able to showcase that. It says a ton of dex and average damage, and you'll see it goes way up. So, tons of crit damage, dex, whatever, will inevitably end up making it do lots more damage. So it's basically a get your paper doll damage up ability. The higher your paper doll damage, the more damage submission is going to do. It's pretty straightforward. It also has a much longer range than sweeping winds. So in this case, 20 yards, I think, yeah, is pretty significantly larger than the 10 yards of sweeping winds. And what that means is that you can often be in range of submission, like I am right now, and not in range of sweeping winds. So right there you saw you get in range of sweeping winds, but still, there you go. So you can see submission continues to do damage when sweeping winds does not, and that's helpful for this build because you want to spread damage out. Damage spread is a concept that hopefully I covered well enough in my walkthrough video, but it's a pretty important part of this build, and it's why I use submission. Okay, so that's pretty well covered. Sweeping winds, for whatever reason, it locks, it snapshots its orientation. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm currently facing southeast. So I cast Sweeping Winds, and let's get it to 3 stacks, and now watch. Every time I crit this guy, it will make a cyclone going east. Every time. It's 100%. And that's because it remembers the direction you were facing when you cast it, for whatever reason. So every single one of them will go this direction. So let's face instead northeast. Cast cyclone. Okay. Crit. Give me some crits here. Give me some crits. Bam! Goes this way. I don't know why. I don't know why they implemented this feature. It's not so smart, but whatever. Face this way. Get some crits. And watch cyclones go that direction, for whatever reason. And the way you use this, because most of the route that I run is facing this direction. It's facing southwest. The majority of the time you'll be running southwest if you do the route that I choose. So I always face northeast when I cast Cyclone, and that makes the majority of my cyclones go behind my character model. And this sort of works like the Barbarian's Run Like the Wind ability, where it leaves behind a damage-dealing source to clean up trash that's already hurt by your AoE from Sweeping Winds and your AoE from Mantra of Conviction Submission and your Tempest Rush hits. So that's a fun trick with Sweeping Winds locking in that direction. Alright, so the last thing I want to showcase is Sweeping Winds also locks the buff from Deadly Reach and the buff from Blinding Flash. So I've got my min damage gear on. I don't want that, because I think that actually makes it non-static. Let's actually get rid of both. Okay, so 623, 623. So I'm hitting for 623 here. Alright, so I cast this, and it's going to do something like 72 damage, maybe a little bit. Let's get my regen going. Let's get more regen going. Alright, so it's hitting for like 80. I might have clicked that wrong. Alright, what's it hitting for? 82? Looks like it's hitting for about 82 damage. That's oddly static for it. There you go, it starts to differentiate. So now, check out what happens if I go 1, 2, 3, get my damage buffed, Blinding Flash, Sweeping Winds. And now you can watch, even though Blinding Flash wears off, it does hundreds of damage, or 100 plus damage. So it's significantly higher. So in the beginning of every single run, you go 1, 2, 3, get that buff going, and then Blinding Flash, and then cast Sweeping Winds. And you can see also, you can see how much damage I'm doing, and I'm going to cast Blinding Flash in the middle, and watch Sweeping Winds continue to do the exact same damage, because it locked that buff from before. So it's no longer doesn't care what you cast. So that's pretty much all there is to it as far as mechanics go for this build. There's not a whole lot that's special about it. The triple hit of Tempest Rush, so the 3 hits per second, is kind of the biggest thing here, because it allows you to use a really slow Scorn and still get away with double or triple hitting mobs, which allows you to get a high enough proc coefficient to make Cyclone actually worthwhile. Because if Tempest Rush only hit once per second, you would literally never hit a lot of the mobs you pass through, and it would make Cyclone pretty terrible. So yeah, hopefully that covers it. If you guys have any mechanics questions at all, please just ask. I'm always happy to talk about mechanics stuff. Yeah. Alright, good luck guys.